Welcome to the Conscious Diva podcast. I'm Tatiana, and with me today is Tammah Watts. Tammah is a licensed therapist, a birding enthusiast, and the author of the new Hay House book, Keep Looking Up, Your Guide to the Powerful Healing of Birdwatching. In her book, Tammah chronicles her personal struggles to overcome her physical, neurological, and mental health challenges through the powerful healing of birdwatching. Her book is filled with spiritual wisdom. She beautifully chronicles her inspiring personal story with how-to guides to birding, navigating the birding community, and coping with chronic pain. We begin our conversation with the question, how is birding a spiritual practice? I hope you enjoy this episode and take away something new. Great to meet you, Tammah, and I really enjoyed your book, Keep Looking Up, Your Guide to the Powerful Healing of Birdwatching. It was awesome. Look at all my little tabs.
Oh, wow, how cool. Thank you.
All the notes that I'd made on the book. I want to ask you one question before I have you share your story and how you came to write the book, because it was a really heartfelt story in your book. But the first question I just wanted to ask you is, what makes birdwatching a spiritual practice?
It's really about the fact that birds are of this natural world. And I believe, and what I say in the book too, is that birds transcend time, space. They're part of our wonderful and magical universe. And for me, and to me, and for many folks, they really symbolize the essence of our beings because they reach back in time immemorial. They travel through with our ancestors and always have. They usher us into the future before we're even there because of what they represent and how they commune with us. And so we have the opportunity to commune with them. And what I like about this, the spiritual connection with birds, is that for each one of us, it is very unique and very personal for who we are and how we connect with the birds in a spiritual way. And to me, that is what is so transformative and healing about communing with birds. If I could say it as short as possible, but that's really what it's hard to grab that essence. That's what this whole thing was about, is what I experienced was that spiritual, deep connecting that results in healing and connection and community and learning of self and of others and all of that stuff. So I say life, and I say it in shorthand, which is life and living, but that's really what I mean is that piece.
That's beautiful. Thank
You
you.
know,
And I just wanted to open it up with that because I read your whole book and that was the takeaway for me as well. But I wanted to just hear it spoken out of your mouth because it's also a great way into you describing your story, what happened with this transcendent experience from the chronic pain you were living through. So can you just begin with now sharing, how did you come to start observing birds? Because you obviously lived in the same environment for years in your same house, but it's like it took an event for you to start noticing them in a different way.
yes. And I almost feel like that event happened over a process of time, and that event was loss. That event was grief at the loss of a life that I lived and experienced. What I had known was suddenly, it felt to me a sudden and abrupt, and it was, in actual terms, a sudden and abrupt change and shift where I was functioning and well. So I thought in the ways that I imagined myself to be, running 60, 70 hours a week. And then after going into surgery, coming out of that surgery, really very much different. And what ultimately became the realization of very chronic and severe pain, a neurological condition that is considered rare among rare disease and disorders. And so there wasn't a lot of knowledge about it. And so as I was trying to figure this all out, there was a lot of changes that were happening. I had to stop working. I was on disability. The shift in how I communicated with folks, it became a very small world for me that became very disconnected. Now, when you're in those kinds of going through that, you don't necessarily, it's like I had cognizance of it, but at the same time, I didn't because you're in it. And
Mm.
so the darkness can get really dense, and isolation in the midst of family and some friends still exists, because mentally we become closed in. And so that's what I was in. I was in this cycle of chronic pain that bred deep depression. And the more I recognized I was in depression, I went into this shift of shame about that. Like, why should I, I can deal with this. There's a better way of handling this. I should know better. Why can't I? And all those, that negative self-talk that sometimes we get into the loop of, really descended me further and deeper into more pain, more depression, and not seeing the outside world in any way, really, just kind of going through. And then to one day, after several years of taking medications and not, those weren't working, and I was really struggling, I happened to be at the kitchen window trying to fill a pan of water because I had really, my motor skills were impaired significantly. And I happened to look up in this tree. I have a kitchen window that has a fountain that was put in when we first moved into this, suburbs housing division. It had nothing in it. But for some reason, I thought I want this tranquil, peaceful water source, not thinking about birds, just that. And so that was there. And in this tree we planted, which happened at the time we planted, we didn't realize how tall it would get. And I share all of this because it all goes together with inviting this gift to come to me. And
Mhm.
so this tree was very tall and very, it exists. Its presence is very much known. And it has these lovely little yellow blossoms. And so I happened to look up and see what I thought at first were little yellow blossoms moving around. And then ultimately, it was this yellow bird that was flitting about up in the trees. And it began to come down further towards the water because birds, bathing and all. And there was an instantaneous moment where I made connection with the bird physically, spiritually, emotionally. As it came down, it looked at me, I looked at it, just a split second, but there was this magical, like, this bird, it is a bird. And then it flew away.
Was it a yellow warbler?
It was, but at the time, and the reason why I did not even know the name of what a yellow
Right,
warbler.
right. But had you noticed yellow birds in your yard in the past before?
No, no, no. This
That's
was
what I thought. I
truly,
thought when you described
yeah.
the little him as an angel, I wondered. I thought, wow, I wonder if this was the first time that he showed himself, or any colorful bird for that matter, in your yard.
And that's not to say that perhaps it had been there before, right?
Hmm.
But like you said, I love how you said that presents itself, the presence of
Yeah.
it, that's exactly what happened. And at the time, of course, I didn't know what was happening, but this is, so I had not, and I did not know what it was. I wasn't into birding in any way of that. So I didn't know. And
And
so then
let's just tell the listeners that, sorry to interrupt you, that at
no,
this point, as you said really briefly, you were filling up a water in the sink, you could barely move. You describe it in your book as you could barely even take 5 footsteps, and you'd spent that time in your pajamas, like for years at this point, it sounded like. And this is before COVID, right? This is before the rest
oh
of the
yeah, yeah,
world
yeah.
was experiencing
Oh yes,
isolation. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. So I could ambulate. It wasn't smooth. It was very, but I was couch bound because of all the medications I was taking, because of all the pain. It just is very debilitating and mobilizing. And because of the depression, to be perfectly honest, the depression is also, can be as debilitating as many physical, medical conditions, let's say. Not that depression isn't a medical condition, because it is. And so, and then I had the neurological condition that really made it hard for me, like to hold a pencil or brush my teeth. Or so even filling up the pan of water, I would have to, it was a small little pan, I'd have to use two hands and just, be very careful and just feel part of it up even. So it was really physically, I was, yeah, debilitated is really what it was, and in different ways. And it began to spread across my body because there was no treatment that was effective that folks knew about, et cetera, et cetera. So it was, yeah, it was a process. And no, I didn't know what kind of bird it was. And so just seeing that. And so each time I would go to the kitchen and look up, I started, because the tree's tall, I would look up into this tree, hoping to see this beautiful yellow bird, and I would be gifted, as you said, it would make its presence known to me frequently. And it was during the springtime, and so yes, yellow warblers do migrate through. I'm in Southern California, so they migrate through Southern California during spring migration. And so this was a male yellow warbler. For anyone who may or may not know, they're very bright yellow, like a lemony, buttery Scotch, gorgeous yellow with little red streaks. And
Mhm.
so they're very prominent when they're, like you said, present themselves. And so I kept seeing it. So and so it brought me this connection, like you said, the spiritual connection that invited me to start to notice when it wasn't around other birds. Then I began to notice the residents that live in the same space, the yard that had always been there, but the yard took on a whole different realm. It felt like sanctuary. And to this day, that's what I see the yard as. It's my sanctuary. It's sacred. It changes, and yet it's the same. And birds are part of that. And so there's some that live there, like mourning doves and the house finches and the crow or two that comes through. And I could just name them. And then I noticed the visitors that come through during different seasons. So it began to show life again. It began to say there is life beyond your pain, your loss, the grief of this. Look at all that there is for you right here. You don't have to go far, it's right here. And so that's what began to reduce my symptoms as I began to notice and spend time. It took me many months, at a minute at a time. I would start to venture outdoors, whereas before I was staying in, and I just went out however I was. If in any way that I could be out there, I would just spend a little time and then go back in and not have that judgment about, oh, you should have stayed longer, or you're limping even more today. You need to just stay in here. And I'd say no. And in days where I really felt very, very debilitated and couldn't get up, I would look out through the window, whether it was the kitchen window or the family room windows, most often, and just look out. And that too helped me to connect and still stay like in community is really what it becomes, and in communion.
So what was the timeline from first noticing that first season in the spring to when you actually started to get out completely and had that first experience where you decided to join a birding group away from your home, as you describe in the book? What was the timeline? Because obviously, in a book, it's unless you're specifically saying, oh, 6 months I did this or did that. I was imagining it was over a couple of years, or like there was a time, because as you just described, there was a period of gaining the confidence almost to go back outside, taking baby steps, taking these little actions, and then realizing the birds were gifting you this opportunity to come and spend time with them, to then making this leap, and to the point where you go and explore puffins. I love that. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, amazing.
Yeah. I'm laughing because there's a funny story. I have to tell this really quick funny story because this is part of what happened. Yeah. So you're right. It was this sense of I started feeling alive and part of the birds so much. I'm like, I started to get curious about them. And that's what birds can bring too, is a sense of curiosity about
Mm.
them and the world they're in. And
Yeah, it's
so I began to,
unexpected.
yeah. And so I was like, what bird am I seeing? Because I did not know what birds I was seeing. So I looked and, figured out, oh, they have guidebooks.
I do have the Sidley great big book of
Oh,
birds.
you do?
I do.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you're a bird
I
lady, I
I
see.
needed to know what some birds were when we were living in Colorado. I'm like, my God, there's all these birds I've never seen before. What the heck are they? So
So I started to get curious and extend my connection about them in that way. And that's when I began to, and so that took over, I think it was like 4 or 5 years, that period from seeing the yellow warbler, noticing the birds outside. And then I started going around in my neighborhood, just kind of staying around. And so one day I thought, I'm going to get really brave. And there's a app called eBird, which many people might know about or not, but it's designed by the Cornell University, Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And what it is it's a way of creating community science, and it tracks what species of birds are in what location. And so folks can go on and say, these are the birds I saw, and they have an app where you can just put it in, and they can see destination, your location and all that. So over time, they can really see patterns of different species and birds and all of that related to climate and all kinds of stuff.
Oh,
So it's
that's
really
awesome.
helpful. Yeah, so I felt like this is another way, if anyone's as well as listening about that, to connect with community, even if you're by yourself, even if you're alone and you choose to do so. There's different ways. So I thought I'm going to get brave and I'm going to create my little location in my backyard, which I did. And I misidentified a bird as a Bendire's thrasher, which is considered a very rare bird. It would not be in typically in Southern California. So all that to say, this was years and years ago when I think our phone number was still listed in the phone book kind of thing where people could get it. And so we started getting calls and they were like, "Can we come to your backyard? We need to come take pictures. Do you mind if we sit in your backyard?" And I was to my husband, I'm like, "What is happening? What is happening? Where are these people?" Because here I am, this
These
neophyte
crazy
trying
bird people want to come to the yard.
right. And so yeah, so that exposed me to the world of birding in that way. Like this intensity kind of scared me. It did. It scared me from eBird quite a bit. It's like, oh no, because then I learned, oh, it wasn't. So, and that helped me. But that would kind of gave me the idea as well to kind of see like there's this even broader world of people.
Mm,
And I was aware of birding groups like Audubon from many, many years ago. And then one day I just really decided, like, I want to expand my knowledge, my connection, and my curiosity that I had learned to experience in my backyard, in my neighborhood, around in the trail systems, feeling safe to broaden that circle out. So the next step was to join a group or explore that opportunity. And so that's what I did. And because I thought, I don't look like a typical birder, whatever that looks like. I had these notions and potions of ideas. I thought I researched the different local Audubon chapters. I live in North County, San Diego, and so I selected one on the coast, not too far from me, because it had a nature center. And at the time, the kids were still young, so I thought this is another way to connect them to a nature center, and I just liked that idea. But I also still felt nervous because I didn't know birds. I just did not know the birds, and I really still felt nervous. And so they have an annual event called the Christmas Bird Count, and it's done across the country, actually parts of the world. And it's again a moment in time during a 2-week period in December where birds are counted, and it goes back from like early 1900s. But the point is, it's an annual event, and they had put on their website um, like beginners welcome. And so I thought, well, this is a large community event. I can blend in. If I don't know the birds, it's not a big deal. They said beginners welcome. This is perfect for me. And so I attended, and my life, Tatiana, I'm telling you, I don't even know how to explain this type of joy that I had in my heart, in my soul. I was moving ways I hadn't moved before. I was connecting and smiling to the point that, as I say in the book, Tom, the guide, he was like, "Wow, you're really enjoying yourself. You look really happy." I did not know him. He didn't know me, but that's how much joy I was showing. I mean, from the birds just being out and learning, and they allowed you to ask questions, and just basic birds like, well, that's a house finch and that's a house sparrow. No question was deemed like novice or what are you doing here or you can't talk. There were kids, there were people of all ages,
And
and
how was your body feeling during this period? Like when you were having this experience with the birds, how was your body feeling to have been in all that pain? Like where you were obviously at a place where you had now moved through, but had you completely transcended the pain?
no, 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 no. And to be perfectly honest, this is a condition that is you have it for life. You
Okay.
really do. It's like no one ever gets 100% cured. So I can't say that I'm 100% cured from it. I don't have anywhere near the kind of symptoms and pain that I had back then. Like I can, move about. I still have to monitor myself, on certain days. So well, on that day, that's what I meant. I felt I had such joy. I felt beyond my body. I was moving in ways that I hadn't moved before. I was able to keep up with the group. They would walk and drive because there's lagoons around Southern California and San Diego County. There's lagoons, freshwater lagoons. So San Diego gets a lot of birds that come through. And
Mm.
so I was able to do all of that. I was exhilarated and my body transcended pain. That's truly, and the joy mentally was showing clearly for him to acknowledge that a complete stranger. And that sense of Like, it was renewal.
Mm.
Just it has I have coveted that. That is why I had to write about that experience. I mean, I don't think words will ever be able to experience to share. I wish I could, how deeply that moved me, because there was a part of me that was like, you all don't even know this is a day of liberation, of joy, of going into another realm of being that you all think I look quote unquote normal and I'm okay. And here's a woman who presents to you in pain, depression, loss, and this is an opportunity for something else. And they didn't even know. Do
Mm.
you know what I'm saying? It was just so they are part of that
Yeah.
gift,
On the outside, you look totally fine.
quote unquote. Right. They
Yeah.
may notice a limp here and there, but it's like, all in all, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Because
and,
that
and
level
that
of pain doesn't, it's not like a cut on the body. You're not missing a limb. It's not an obvious pain.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And fast forward to like COVID, when people got shut down, a lot of people with chronic conditions that have been indoors, that have had these trials and tribulations, this resonated. We had recognized this shutdown, unfortunately. But I mean, it helped, I think, to allow folks to really understand how you can seem okay and not be okay, and what isolation feels like. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. So when did you have the idea for the book? Was it during COVID? You wrote it during COVID, right? And then you won the Hay House Writers Competition too.
I did. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And so this, the I always get flummoxed because really, this is what I believe. This is what I just know in my soul. Like, the birds are ushering this journey along. That is the truth. That is just the truth of it all. So how the birds came forward for the book, in the fall of 2019, so it was before COVID. It was like October, I think it was October 2019. Hay House had a writers workshop in Houston. And I have a very good friend that I've known since high school that lived in Houston, and I hadn't visited her yet. And I thought, hey, I can spend time with her, go to this weekend workshop, and learn about the publishing world, because it was new for me. And I really trust Hay House. I, of course, been a reader and a follower for many years, and felt like I could trust the information that would be given, because I was interested in writing a children's book. I had gone the year before to Cuba with my husband for his birthday, and I loved it. And I wanted to write a children's book about the experience there, through the eyes of a little dog. So that's why I was going, is for a children's book. And so there I am with my little agenda, and even a couple of questions about children's books. And then it was time to go to lunch, and I decided to go by myself. It was a wonderful morning. For some reason, I didn't want to go with other people. I just felt like I need this time by myself. So I walked down the street to a little cafe. And while I'm sitting there, I remembered something that Reed Tracy had said in the morning session, which was, write what you're passionate about. And I'm sitting there waiting, and I'm like, I'm passionate about birds and what they've done, and how they've healed me, and just all my life has changed with them.
Oh,
That
I
is
just
what I'm
got
supposed to
goosebumps.
write. I know, because I'm sitting and I'm not making it was a glass plate window, and the sun literally was lighting up the table.
Yeah.
I don't always share this. I feel like I can say it with you because
Yeah. It was
who
a
you are.
mystical
Yeah,
moment.
I know, because I feel like when I say, sometimes I feel like, okay, but
Oh, no, I
it
get it.
lit,
Totally.
yeah,
Tell me.
yeah.
I
So
love
it
it.
lit the table. It lit up the table, sunlight. And I took out my yellow tablet where I had been writing my notes from the workshop, and I just started to write. Yes, I bird watching at home, bird watching in the community, bird watching in health, mental health, relationships. And I just had this flooding of, this is what this is about, this is what it is. And that is the chapters in the book. That
Yeah.
is what became the book. It has not changed from that. I put little notes. I worked on it over the weekend as we were going through the workshop. It became clear to me, like, this is why I'm here. It's the birds. I'm supposed to be it's not the children's book right now. It's the birds, the healing. This is why I'm here. It was the
Love it.
birds brought me there. And so
Oh,
I just work. And my friend's home, she lives alone. She has this beautiful, tranquil, serene environment. So it really allowed that creativity to extend beyond the workshop into the evening, and just the joy of being with a childhood friend. Do you know what I mean? Like they know
Yeah.
you, they get you. You don't have to
Yeah.
explain. It's like if,
Mhm. You
we're
can just
both wearing
be.
our, yes, our thick glasses and our,
Love it.
just hanging out and just catching up in life and that. So I feel like that also infused this creativity and an ability to foster that out. And so then I
Mm.
just moved on to work on the proposal and then submitted it during the first cohort of the online writers workshop
Okay.
group. Um, and then they selected it.
Yay! Amazing, amazing. Yay, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
I really did love in your book the analogies to the birds in human life and from describing our flock, feathers, bird legs, and migration and ritual. And I was actually describing your book to a friend of mine yesterday. And so I was describing your story and I was telling my friend because her company is actually a birding company and a coffee company. It's Birds and Beans. And they're,
Oh,
do you know them?
you know what? At the Bird Festival, are they in San Diego?
I don't think they're based on the East Coast. So no, they're not. I mean, it could be sold.
Oh, maybe
I know
that's
that many Audubon branches do sell their coffee. They're certified by the Smithsonian Bird Friendly, that they have that
yes,
certification, Birds and Beans Coffee. And so I was telling
yes.
her about them because I said, you should meet her. And I'd love to get some coffee for her. And because they're one of the few coffee companies in the world that are supporting sustainable farmers. They understand the importance of the migratory bird path around the world. And so they work only with farmers who are growing sustainably, who are respecting their habitat, and so then she said, "Oh my God, we'll send her the coffee. Just give me her info. We'll send her the coffee and we'll promote this episode, this
Oh
podcast
my
episode
God.
because we love promoting everybody in the bird space. And so at the
Oh,
end, I'll get your info and I'll put you guys together.
how
And
wonderful. Yes. I've had their
yeah,
coffee, yes, because it's shade grown, which is really important. I won't go
yes,
into it all here, but yeah, the conscientious, I have had their coffee. Yes, indeed.
it's good coffee. I've got it
Yes.
here too, and it's also certified organic and fair trade and
Yes.
everything else that's
Yes.
great. But
Yes.
anyway, so come back to your book. Tell us, you have these wonderful practices in the book. Give an example, so you're not giving the whole book away. But for example, you have the ritual and then also obviously mental health, and you have these really great exercise prompts and breakdowns. So can you give an example of um how somebody can work with your book?
Sure. It really is a book that you can use it in different ways. So each chapter opens with a personal story, and I really emphasized the importance I really wanted to share. Well, there's a part of me I felt compelled to. There's a part so I didn't really want to tell the stories because it really is tapping into that deep spaces of pain and
Yeah.
love and joy and despair. But I also felt compelled to do so because, like the birds, I needed to present in the way that I know to be, which is just how I am.
Mm.
And part of that was sharing these personal stories because I know in my heart and soul we all experience similar experiences, maybe not exactly the same, but those emotions and those feelings and those relationships and all of that. And I wanted to destigmatize the notion that there's something wrong with that. Like there's something wrong with having any kind of mental health condition or health difference or relationship dynamics and loss, things that we kind of are afraid to address, yet we all experience. I wanted to kind of open that up and how birds help and journey along with us through all of these different aspects of our lives. And so that's why the book, I share the story because there's been evidence that supports even reading stories about different triumphs and challenges is medicinal,
Mhm.
is helpful for the reader. So that was partly why I did it. And then you can read the story, and I hope it taps in and resonates with the reader, and then move into the exercises like the starter toolkits if you've not maybe even thought about birds before, it's a way so that you don't have to figure it out. Maybe it helps usher you along, and here's how you can get started. And then you can modify it to what you need. I really emphasize adjust it to what you can do, when you can do it, and how you want to do it. It's okay. And then because I have a background as I am a licensed therapist, as a mental health clinician, I really wanted to tap into how does this resonate for you and help deepen the reader's connection to each chapter that way. So I really tapped into that to help folks be able to revisit those reflective exercises. Like there's the reflection pond where I say, if you can only see yourself in still water. So it's an idea of stand at the water's edge and imagine you're a crane standing at water's edge, gazing at your own reflection. And then I would ask you, what do you notice? What comes forward for you about yourself and about life? So that's kind of how I do it. So you can choose to do the exercises. The book is designed to start at home and then move out into your community and then into health and mental health, like I said, and then can factor in relationships, which I think is a huge piece of this.
Mm.
Is really tapping, like you mentioned, feathers. And it is true, each chapter has a subtitle that's very symbolic. And so feathers is really a special one to me. Not that they all aren't, but this one in particular, because when you imagine, almost everyone has either seen a feather lying on the ground, on the earth, or somewhere floating by,
Yeah.
and or has been gifted a feather. Someone has said, "Oh, I saw this, I'm going to give it to you." That is very symbolic. There is a really significant spiritual connection in that. The
Mm.
fact that that person thought of you to give you the feather, there's a reason. And usually there's a conversation that you have with that person, usually, or they say, I saw this feather, I thought of you. And a lot of times folks are like, I wonder what kind of feather it is. So there's usually a discussion about what bird it came from and what does that mean and what is the symbolism of it. And so and then we usually covet those feathers and set them aside like they were a gift. They were meant to be for you, especially if they show up in your path. So that's the importance of feathers. And so it's symbolic in that the bird's feather, a bird's wing is made up of different layers of feathers. There's primary feathers, there's secondary feathers, and tertiary feathers. And so they overlap one another. And that's what helps that wing to fly. That's what helps lift that bird with both wings to fly, are all these feathers. And so I liken that to our relationships, that we have primary relationships and secondary relationships and tertiary, those that are more extended out. But collectively, they all have meaning, and collectively, they help us to lift up, to stay to soar,
Yeah.
to fly. So that's what's so important about feathers. And then I talk about how some people are not going to be into birds in your family or friends. And that helps us to have compassion for them and for ourselves, right? When we have compassion for ourselves, we can extend it to others, and accept folks for where they're at. Just like the birds accept us, it's like I really encourage folks to extend that to others. Like they may not want to go on birding trips, they may not want to go off trails, but maybe they might look out the window one day, while they're having their, tea or whatever, and notice. Because that's what's happened for me is they'll say, I'm not into birding, I'm not like you. And then they'll send me photos like, look what I saw today, you know?
Well, it was great. Yeah, I enjoyed reading it, and it's a relatively quick read, but you can
Yes.
also carry it around with you and use those prompts to take notes. And what my reaction to the book, what it brought out for me was I thought a lot about all the birds in my life. I've lived in a lot of different places. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, where we have some very unique indigenous birds that can only be found there, like the cockatoos and galahs, and very specific types of magpies. There's the tawny frogmouth, which kind of looks like an owl, but is actually in the warbler family, interestingly. It looks nothing like one, has a super
I know.
wide beak
I
and can
know.
swallow frogs whole, hence its name.
I know. I want to see those birds. I have to get
Yeah,
to
so they're
Australia.
really unique, and it made me just think back on my connection to them. And I live in Vermont now, and we're surrounded by amazing birds. And I've lived in Colorado, and it made me think about the migratory pattern. Where did what time of the years did I notice the same birds, and whether it was chickadees or the red-winged blackbirds, or the cardinals, I feel like are more sort of East Coast birds, but the blue jays, I wrote them all down, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I thought about the wild turkey families that are around, and there's how the mothers, when in the section about flock in your chapter on flock, I thought about the Canadian geese families that live around here, and the last several seasons they come back and have their babies the goslings in the same place. And my daughter, who's almost 14, and we always say, oh, they're having look, the nesting pair are back every season, like they're back to have their babies. And then we look out for them over the weeks and the months to see, have they
Yeah.
hatched? How big are they? How big? Oh, look, they're in the pond now. They're all swimming together. And then we always say, oh my gosh, that's the kind, like that's the pond. That's where you want to live. If you're a goose, that's where you're going to come back in your next life and live, because there's no hunters. It's this pristine, incredible looking pond, and they all look so healthy and happy. And then we have these turkeys that run around, and the mother turkeys, they'll stop traffic like a human mother. They will jump and they will
Yes.
and they're big
Yes.
birds, and they can
Yes.
fly too. So
Yes.
they will fly and then usher the whole, the rest of the
Right.
flock across, and all the adults, and they're hilarious. So it really made me think about that, and also the analogy of the human flocks, as you say in the book,
Yeah.
finding your flock. So I loved that, and then I did go out and think about the section on grief. I thought was beautifully crafted, and just the prompts there for both. My parents are still alive, but my father's hasn't been well for several years, and he lives in Australia. And so I thought, I'm going to apply this, the same technique to calling out, is there a bird that might be connected to him?
Mm,
Because it's a different time zone. He's in a sleep state, and the soul, there's accessing
mhm,
power during those
mhm,
hours. And
mhm,
so I decided to just see how would that would there be a reaction? Would a message, would a bird come if I tried this practice? And remarkably, it was the blue jay. And I hadn't ever really thought of him as connected to blue jays, but when the blue jay, and yes, they've been flying around, it's that part of the year where they come, but it was the observing of the blue jay that made me feel that it was representing a message from him,
mhm.
that there was a connection there because of the way they're kind of more in a family in terms of birds. They'll all be around together. There's always I'm not sure if it's the male or the female, but because they're blue. Even the females tend to have blue feathers in the blue
Yeah.
jays, not as bright as the males, but they're always in a flock, and they're very protective, and they're always kind of calling out to one another and letting the other blue jays know if there's danger, or if there's food, or whatever's going on. They're very
Yes.
vocal, as a group. Not we have woodpeckers
Yes.
too. They make their own sounds. But yeah, so it was beautiful. So thank you for the experiences and
Wonderful.
the memories and what it brought out for me. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. That always, because I don't always, I am an intuitive, so I feel hearing the story really, like I can channel and feel that
Mm,
energy of yours. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I'm
yeah.
glad that you called upon him.
I thought, why not? Like, why not give it a go, and
Yeah,
just see what kind of an experience can come from that. So yeah, it was beautiful. Thank
yeah.
you.
I'm glad that you did that. Yeah. And then, and sometimes for some people, I mean, the bird, it's a bird that will appear that doesn't, seems like, quote unquote, doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
why is this bird sitting on this ledge or perching and coming and coming and coming time and time again? And doesn't seem to have fear of you. Like, it just something, it catches you, and you just, and the messages come through to
Mm.
you, like, this is who this is. This is, they're letting me know they're okay, or they're letting me know I see you, I'm with you, or you can do this, or don't despair, or
Yeah.
whatever the message is, or you're on the right track, or yeah, no, do it. It just,
I do.
the
Well, there's an
message
owl
is,
that comes. There's an owl in the fall and in the winter. It's interesting. And it sits on we have a huge stump. I'm guessing it was a pine tree. It was removed before we bought the property. And it's on our driveway. And this owl sometimes sits there in the evening when I'm driving down. And there's been a couple occasions where I'm like, oh, with my son, interestingly, it's with him. And we've seen the owl 3 times together. And we're both
Wow.
like, wow. And he's 19. So we're the two of us are like, wow, this is our special owl who comes to us. You know, he has a message for us. You know, it's
Yes.
quite special. So yeah, no, I love it. I'm totally
Yeah.
tracking, you know, and, and
I
into the
love it.
experience. It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, no, I love it. And so I wanted to quickly ask you about your title because it has a double meaning. To explain, keep looking up.
It does. It does. So it goes back to when I was looking up through the window. I had to look up because I couldn't. The tree grew is so tall. It's our house is a two-story house, and it goes up above that. So it's so tall. I had to lean out, and so I would not out of the window, but up,
Hmm.
and I would see it. And so that just, it's the looking up. And then you notice when people are actually bird watching, most often you are looking up into trees, up on roofs, ledges, telephone wires. Are those a thing anymore? You know what I mean, though. Look,
Yep, telegraph
whatever
poles.
wire, right? It's
Yeah.
like those are going away, but wires of any sort, they're usually high up or they're flying overhead, soaring. So oftentimes you're looking up at birds. That's not to say there are some birds that just only move around on the ground. I'm not saying you don't look down, but that's where it comes from, is looking up. And then, like you said, the double entendre is the reminder of looking to keep hope, to keep inspiration, inspired, to keep positive, even when things are difficult. I'm not saying not that it's not this toxic positivity thing, because if you read the book, you'll really quickly get that that's not what I'm saying at all. It's
Yeah.
like, let's acknowledge what has been difficult, what is difficult, what has been pained, as a way of healing. And so that looking up is really about heal in this way. So that's where the title came from. And again, I'm telling you, it came, I don't even remember how it came. I really can't tell you the genesis of it. It just seemed like that's what it was supposed to be. And I might, I haven't looked at my tablet. It might have written it that day in the cafe.
Wow.
I have to go look because I really can't remember. But because it's been with my mind for so long, like
Yeah.
it's just been, that's what the title is. That's
It
what the
was
title
channeled
is.
to you.
Yeah, even with Hay House, they were ultimately open to the title. As I said, it just has to be this. Like it's just, this
Great.
is what it is.
What I kept wondering was, have you explored what your spirit animal is? And if you have, it's definitely a bird. What kind of bird is it?
So I don't explore spirit animal
Hmm.
for some reason, and just I just don't. So I don't have a spirit animal. I've been told by a friend who's indigenous, but I don't have, like, it hasn't come to me what for myself in that way. And I don't know, part of it because my grandmother is very much African American, but also her father is indigenous, and so there's that root of that piece of it. I don't know. So I don't have that. I just,
Interesting.
and I don't know if it's because I also channel so much of people's energy into me. I don't know why that is, but that's just, I don't have one.
I'm sure you do if you well, what did your friend say? I'm sure if you chose to explore that, something would reveal itself to you, and I'm sure it would be a beautiful, great bird, like a white, like a larger bird, not a tiny. I think like I can see a beautiful big, the Australian cassowary was coming to me,
Oh,
which is, and I'm sure you know what that looks like, an astounding
yes,
bird with incredible presence.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and very unique. So, yeah, maybe you never know. And then on that same topic, what do you think when people, because so many people put messages to birds, but I'm often like, well, what if you would live somewhere where they're every day they're there? How do you feel about messages?
I think it's important, and I think it's really, as each one of us experiences birds and the messages that we receive and the connection we have with them, like the communion with that particular bird or birds, that to me is what's important. So that if anything, I say honor that, not doubt it, not wonder about it, just really embrace it wholeheartedly in your heart and soul, because it's already there. And so we find ourselves trying to fight against believing in the essence of what that bird represents for you. And so I just say, can we skip past that resistance that many people have? Not everyone, who's not necessarily oriented spiritually to to receive those messages,
Yeah.
to just feel okay receiving those messages, and then being able to then share your story about it in a safe way where someone who's going to accept it and believe it. And because there's so many people around the world that have shared stories about their connection with birds and the
Mm,
meaning and the life force that it offers them, and being able to share it and have it be respected and received in the same spirit is what helps it just to, go to another level of connection and meaning. And so that's part of what I really try to promote is share that with others that you feel safe to do that with.
mm. Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just have one last question. Birding, the difference between birding and bird watching, because there seems to be, I know you clarify it in your book, but when you look online, there's so much discrepancy.
Yes. There's a lot that goes on in the birding world. It's like since then, I'm a bird lady.
Wow.
There's,
Yeah.
birds
People
and
are really like,
squirrels. Yeah, yes. There's a whole. See, this is the thing about birds. Birds really is like symbolic of like everything in life in a macro way. So birds bring in about conservation, environmental justice, climate, the health of our world, how we interrelate with one another. What's our piece to give back to the birds, to the environment, to the habitats that we live in or go to and visit, etc. I mean, it's in our cultures, our religions, all of it. So, in that context, birding is the more preferred term that is coming forward because watching, not everybody can watch a bird. You may not have sight in the way that we might traditionally say with your eyes, or you may not be able to hear, or you may not be able to walk. So you might see, we try not to use the word bird walks anymore and say bird outings, bird opportunities. And then there's groups too that are of different affinities, like the Feminist Bird Club. There's Audubon. There's BIPOC birding. There's recently just had Black Birders Week through Black SF and STEM. And this is a way to help bring folks that may not normally feel comfortable being in the birding arena of spending time in the outdoors in spaces that sometimes don't always feel safe, to be able to feel safe and to be able to do so and enjoy connecting, being on the land and connecting with birds. That to me, it's like it's given, the universe offers this for all of us.
Yeah.
We could be anywhere in the world, there's going to be birds, and we don't even have to quote unquote pay for it. You don't have to have equipment, you don't have to have a certain item or dress a certain way to have it. So someone in a hut in a village in Africa, or someone, in Alaska in a lodge, can still enjoy the birds that's around them. And so birding helps to create this inclusive, all consideration term. Whereas
Mm.
bird watching is still used interchangeably, but it's kind of confining in some instances. So it's really, we're trying to be intentional and conscientious and conscious, I dare say, truly about how the birds are, and what it's more than just birds. It's us as people, and our souls are involved in this. Let's tend to our souls as we're caring for the birds. Like, how do you do one without the other? Is really where it comes down to. So
Mm.
people are feeling more comfortable to come forward about that. And let me not forget folks with who maybe move around differently, who have
Yeah.
persons with disabilities that need, information about how to go about different things, and still enjoy the birds.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Thank you for mentioning that because you have it in your resource section of your book. You've got extensive resources in the back of your book. I was really impressed with how many websites and how many things you actually provide here. It's like huge. Yeah, I love it. It was a really, really pleasant read and surprising, in ways that were, yeah, just unexpected for me, as I shared before, reconnecting and actually remembering that I have a connection to birds, because it's something I took for granted because I'm surrounded by them and I get the opportunity to experience them every day, and I feed them and I look outside, and I hadn't taken the time necessarily to think about how do I feel before I see them, while I'm watching them, and after I see them. So
Oh,
that was really lovely. So thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much. I love it. It warms my heart that you embrace them, and
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
they're
Yeah.
great. Well, is there anything you would like to add?
I just want to say connect with the birds in the way you can. Yes. I really appreciated talking from a spiritual connection with the birds. I really appreciate that. It really is heartwarming. So thank you for that, for reading the book and getting that and feeling that. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
you're welcome. Of course. Yeah. You got to read the book and you've got to feel into it and feel into the practices that are so heartfelt because
right.
they're
Yeah.
meaningful and you've got to try, like just see we can always learn something new, we can always learn from other people. So yeah, I love it. And Hay House
It's
sent me they send me a lot of authors. So I always say I read my background was a TV producer and
yes.
I would always have to read the books and make notes for hosts. So a lot of people don't read them, but you can
Right,
always
exactly.
tell
I
when
know,
people
that's
don't
why I
read the
say thank
books.
you. I know, it's like, thank you for really reading and getting, because and this is just real quick, this birding, the way I wrote this book is not a typical bird book. It's either like this is how you go birding, or here's the type of birds, but not this where you put the spiritual and that
The
piece in it.
practice.
So it was a risk, you
Mm.
know what I mean? But it's like this is how it is this is how I see the birds, and I don't think I'm alone in this. So I appreciate that for that
Oh,
reason. Yeah.
you're welcome.